told that I am better than AJ Styles, that I am better than Low Key. I will not stop until I prove once and for all that I am better than you.
These videos are satiric reviews. You don't have to agree, but don't bitch about it. I hate this channel.
Hello, I'm Brian Zane from Wrestling with Regret.
And I'm, social injustice warrior V Infuso. So with that being said, let's get into it. Let's talk about the best in the world.
Yes, I'm so excited for this. I got all my Shane McMahon notes here, so where do you want to start? Do you want to start with his time in the Mean Street Posse, or his feud with Test, or what about his time as referee Shane Stevens? Very underrated part of his career.
Brian, I was talking about CM Punk.
I knew that. Yes, I did. All along.
Uh-huh. Well, you want to get started?
Yep, just give me a second. Punk began his career like so many other hopefuls in the backyard as the tag team partner of Chick Magnet Venom, known as Chick Magnet Punk, which would later be shortened to CM. His journey hit a huge speed bump when it was discovered his brother Mark had been embezzling money from their small backyard federation. The two have not spoken since. It's safe to say that Punk dealt with disillusion in wrestling from the beginning. After a while, he decided to take wrestling more seriously, and he signed up for a wrestling school in Chicago that was run by Ace Steel, Danny Dominion, and Kevin Quinn. Getting a lot of work in IWA Mid-South and the International Wrestling Cartel, Punk would run up and down the Midwest territory with other future stars of the business. Colt Cabana, Chris Hero, Adam Pearce, Christopher Daniels. These are guys who'd help shape and define the American independent scene for years to come.
I don't put it past any of you 1 second to forget that I hate every single one of you. See, the people here are so stupid when I put them down, they clap and they cheer. This is for my ignoramus right here. And when I look down, I see a cesspool of you ugly, useless people. I want to make something very clear to you. You see how there's nobody sitting on either side of you? Yeah. You're a loser. I look out of the crowd, I see a bunch of third-rate bozo the clowns. You're so aren't you? The biggest group of losers ever assembled on planet Earth. Some of the stupid clowns, screw juggalos. With your lame-ass dog bullshit and your pussy heroes like Twisted and Movie Zane Posse. Shut up! I don't need your applause. I don't need your approval. Yeah! No, I come out here and I see all these pregnant women sitting here in the bleachers, and I gotta wonder, what? Oh, you're not pregnant, you're just big? Oh, I'm sorry.
Fat girls need love too.
Not from me. I ain't getting no love for no fat girls.
Let me explain something to you people! You guys understand? You dumb bitch, I'm not holding the microphone! Hey, I want to introduce everybody in IWA to the smartest girl in the world. She's so fucking ugly, she wears a hockey mask in public. You have to be the ugliest girl that has ever graced the threshold.
That's a girl?
Of an IWA building. Wait, no. 2 rows up and to your left. Come get you some. Why would I want any when everybody else in this rotten town has already had some? I suck that everybody in that locker room knows you swallow. Left arm, right arm.
Got it with your teeth. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Punk's exposure reached a high point in March of 2002 while working for IWA. Eddie Guerrero, in between his runs in WWE, worked a short program for the company, hitting its apex in a triple threat match between he, Punk, and a 12-year-old Rey Mysterio for the heavyweight title. Eddie would win the belt in that triple threat, only for Punk to win it back the next night. The mid-2000s kept the Chick Magnet busy as he was bouncing back and forth between TNA and Ring of Honor throughout much of 03 and 04. This is back when the two companies actually used to have a working relationship. Crazy, huh? Though he'd claimed Ring of Honor tag gold with Colt Cabana on 2 occasions, it was his feud with Raven that really let Punk showcase his talents. The angle road itself, as a straight-edge warrior clashing with a recovering addict, helped turn Punk into a star on a national level. 2005's perhaps best known as the Summer of Punk. One of the biggest surprises of the year came that May, when Punk, who everyone knew was on his way to WWE, beat Austin Aries for the Ring of Honor title and would have been billed as his final match. Somehow, Aries was able to restrain himself from no-selling the finish.
Isn't this the prettiest thing you've ever seen in your entire life? This microphone in the hands of any of the boys in the back is just a microphone. In the hands of a dangerous man like myself, a pipe bomb. This belt in the hands of any other man is just a belt. In my hands it becomes power. The greatest thing the devil ever did was make you people believe he didn't exist. And you're looking at him right now, and all of you stupid, mindless people fall for it. The champ is here.
Punk held the title for months, threatening to take it with him to Stanford, even going so far as to sign his WWE contract on the championship belt. But fortunately for Ring of Honor fans, their blood pressure would be spared when Punk lost the title to James Gibson, the future Jamie Noble, that August.
Wait a minute, you mean to tell me that CM Punk, future world champion and name that transcends various forms of media,
Spoilers!
lost his championship to a trailer trash jobber who was also once Asian by proxy wearing a mask?
Yes.
Wow. Wrestling is weird sometimes.
Yes. Yes, it is. CM Punk officially began with Ohio Valley Wrestling, then WWE's primary developmental league, in the fall, and immediately suffered a ruptured eardrum and broken nose in his first televised match.
I know how to fight, and I know how to wrestle.
How would you like to be the backup boy?
Can't you there?
For the Spirit Squad? Yeah.
Look at me. No, you haven't even earned my gaze. I give you my side.
I'm pretty sure somewhere in that hallway, and as far as some of you go, somewhere in life, you guys made a wrong turn.
Brent Gunner Scott Albright, too bad such a great wrestler, just sucks at life.
You're not spirit material.
Brent Albright, you made me the OVW television champion.
CM Punk, male cheerleader.
Think about it.
I don't gotta think about it. Mondo, you got yourself a deal.
All right.
Just so I can sleep at night. No hard feelings, pal. You're gonna know firsthand that you got punked.
And by the way, you 5 just got punked.
You got punked.
But he would bounce back and in less than a year would win OVW's Triple Crown. You know, I get the feeling that all these conspiracy theories about Punk being held down are kind of bullshit when you consider he was always involved in angles. One of which being against Brent Albright, also known as Chris Benoit's protege Gunner Scott. Down there, he worked mostly under the tutelage of Paul Heyman, who for a time was his biggest supporter, constantly pushing for Punk to make his way onto main roster television. A tactic that might have done more to hinder Punk's progress than to advance it, as Heyman was the man who hired Ian Rotten and the Gangsters, and was also responsible for the mass transit incident.
Nevertheless, Punk did make it onto TV with the aid of Paul Heyman, when WWE relaunched the defunct ECW.
Well, here comes the guy everybody's talking about, Joey. 3 thus far undefeated here in ECW, Taz.
I don't drink.
Watch out!
I don't smoke.
Waiting on Shannon Moore.
I don't do drugs.
CM Punk with a double underhook. Nice. Oh.
My addiction is wrestling.
Oh, with a backhand.
My name is C. M.
Watch out, heads up!
Punk.
Here he comes, CM Punk, baby! A lot of people are talking about the King of Chicago. That man right there, CM Punk.
With Punk allegedly being Paul Heyman's #1 choice to bring on board. In 2006, Punk made his debut defeating Just Incredible. And in front of an ECW audience, when there still was one, that would change after a couple shows, he was cheered over the ECW original. The crowd celebrated his victory, as he beat a homegrown talent, something ECW crowds just weren't known to do. Usually were very unpleasant when things like that happened. And this would only be the first of a few very surprising fan reactions, another of which being when he teamed up with D-Generation X and the Hardy Boys during that year's Survivor Series. And as the four legends shared a ring with the up-and-comer, the crowd chanted for Punk. Now I want you to think about that. Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, all in the ring together. That's a good percentage of the crowd's childhood standing in the ring together. And they're all chanting for Punk, the new guy. And I can't emphasize enough how big of a deal this was because things like this just didn't happen. The reaction was so, and forgive me for the pun here, raw and real that even Triple H had to acknowledge it, letting Punk start off the famous DX catchphrase. Punk would go on to have a 6-month undefeated streak, taking on ECW originals and New Breed alike, feuding briefly with Shannon Moore, notably bitch-slapping him in ways wrestling fans only dreamed of during his V1 phase, and Mike Knox because his girlfriend liked him more. And that is a girl without a type. Though naturally he would eventually lose this streak to the likes of Hardcore Holly. Of course. As the ECW originals feuded with the New Breed of the brand, both sides looked to Punk to make the difference. This is despite the fact that CM Punk wasn't in the original ECW. Ergo, he wasn't an ECW original. Naturally, he'd choose to join his New Breed peers until WWE decided he was far too beloved to be a bad guy. And they turned him back face to team back up with the originals once again, despite not being one of them. Like the previous two Pops mentioned, this was nothing to snore over. Things like this, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding repetitive here, but they just didn't happen. They did not occur. Punk was so beloved by the then ECW audience that he was welcomed and accepted into it as if he was part of the promotion when it went underground. Eventually, Punk was set to square off against the likes of Chris Benoit for the ECW Championship. And given both men's in-ring abilities and overall credentials, I think it's fair to say that this probably would have been one hell of a match. Unfortunately, the match would never take place because Chris would take the life of his wife's son and himself that weekend. Wow, it is impossible to segue away from that. But like WWE, I'm gonna try. In his place was Johnny Nitro. And the thought process going into this match was, oh, well, we obviously know who's gonna win now. I mean, they're not gonna put the belt on Johnny Nitro. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Nitro would win the title. And the following night on ECW, he'd convert his gimmick to that of John Morrison. Now, I know Punk himself has gone on record to say he didn't necessarily enjoy his time working with John Morrison. He felt like they never really gelled well and they didn't really have great matches together. But I disagree. I always enjoyed watching their matches growing up, and even more so, I enjoyed seeing Punk chase after the title. He was my guy. I wanted him to get that belt. Eventually, John Morrison would drop the title to Punk in what was booked as a last chance title match. Meaning if Punk lost, he could no longer compete for the title so long as John Morrison had it. The crowd went wild as the main attraction for ECW at the time was finally crowned. Throughout the next couple months, he defends his title against former New Breed partner Elijah Burke, Big Daddy V. I'm sorry about that. Future WWE champion The Miz, and future Johnny Impact / Johnny Mundo / Johnny whatever brand he's working for, John Morrison. Before oddly enough dropping the belt to Chavo Guerrero of all people. Well, you know, with the help of Edge. That makes it better, right? No. No, it doesn't. And look, I like Chavo as much as the next guy. I mean, I laughed my ass off as a kid watching him enter the ring with his horse toy Pepe. But Jesus, the state of your main event scene if Chavo Guerrero is your world champion, all due respect, I'm just saying.
I want to invite all of you in celebrating my championship. Fiesta!
This is great. What the hell? What the heck?
Who's this guy?
Ryan!
The following contest is a Gulf of Mexico match. The only way to win this match is to throw your opponent into the Gulf of Mexico.
I was stung by a jellyfish!
WWE's version of ECW that was launched in 2006 sucked.
After dropping his championship to everyone's second, or is it third favorite Guerrero, I don't know, Chavo Classic's kind of a sleeper hit.
You let me down, but Chavo never once did.
Punk shocked the world at WrestleMania 24, winning the Money in the Bank briefcase for the first time in his career. He'd go on to do something even more surprising when, 1 week after being drafted to Raw that June, he cashed in on Edge to claim his first World Heavyweight Championship. After defending against guys like Batista and JBL, you'd think that Punk was finally on his way to becoming accepted and treated with respect in the company. Oh wait, never mind, here he is getting beat up backstage at Unforgiven and being forced to drop the title due to a fake injury for no discernible reason.
Hey, that's not true, Brian. Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho needed that title.
Though he was no longer world champ, he remained a pivotal role in programming, winning the Raw Tag titles with Kofi Kingston, and then later the Intercontinental Championship, all within a year of that landmark victory against Edge. He'd become the fastest person to accomplish the rare Triple Crown in WWE, breaking the old record held by Diesel by several weeks. Again, for someone who fans claim was being held down this entire time, the resume seems to disagree. History would repeat itself at WrestleMania 25 in Houston, Texas, when Punk won the Money in the Bank for the second year in a row, the only person to win the match twice, which seems to be a recurring theme here. He was then drafted to SmackDown, and at Extreme Rules, on the same night he beat Umaga in a Samoan strap match, he cashed in his briefcase on Jeff Hardy and once again became World Heavyweight Champion. By this point, Punk's heel turn had now gone into full effect, and Hardy was the perfect foil. By putting these two men together, WWE was able to recreate the angle with Raven that made Punk a household name among fans.
I know you know a thing or two about prescription medication. What I don't think you realize is that you have to go to a doctor to legally obtain some. You haven't failed a drug test in a year. This is not an accomplishment. Why don't you try living a clean lifestyle? Why don't you try living a straight edge lifestyle? Congratulations. You didn't fail a drug test in 365 days. We can start writing your Hall of Fame speech right now. You've got 2 strikes. You know how many I have? 0. And those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Did you ever hear that in school? No, probably not, because you were a screw up then, too. Jeff, you know how many times I've been suspended? 0.
Oh, I get it, so you're not a wrestler, you're my guidance counselor.
No, Jeff, I'm not your guidance counselor, but maybe, just maybe you should wish that I was. You know how many times I've been to a rehab facility? 0. Jeff, you're a dreamer, man. A guy like you could never beat me. And do you know what your chances are of beating me at Night of Champions? 0.
The two traded the title back and forth until Punk finally pushed Jeff out of the company by beating him in a steel cage match on SmackDown. He'd go on to pull an epic troll job in the fans 1 week later with a great Hardy impersonation.
Did you expect somebody else?
Punk went out of the frying pan and into the fire when he went from feuding with Hardy to The Undertaker. Though he'd win his first encounter, it was due to shady, heelish circumstances. Lightning would not strike twice for Punk, as Taker would win the subsequent matches and become the new world champ as a result. Though it sucks that Punk didn't get to end the feud on top, it's a small comfort knowing that when it comes to The Undertaker, few men ever did. After that feud ran its course, CM Punk began displaying a bit of a god complex, touting his supposed healing powers.
Did he tout those skills using tout?
Wait, what now?
Tout? That lame-ass app the WWE invested way too much in, but ultimately just came off as a discount Instagram?
Tout? I'm sorry?
I thought I was out of touch.
You kids and your damn phones. Anyway, when approached with the story, management told Punk he needed to find a diesel to his Shawn Michaels because otherwise it wouldn't be believable for him to take on the dead man, which, ouch. He'd find that insurance policy in the former Festus and Kane imposter Luke Gallows. Apparently he used to act so goofy because he was on pills. So, wait, does that mean that Jesse was his pusher? Was biscuits and gravy some sort of street slang?
Okay, that's amazing. You know, I had an uncle that used to do this exact same thing at Thanksgiving dinner. It was after 3 bottles of wine.
Punk took credit for getting Brother Luke cleaned up and began collecting converts everywhere he went. After getting Serena Deeb to shave her head, the Straight Edge Society was officially born. Punk even grew out his hair and his beard to look like Jesus, or Charles Manson, depending on whether or not I'm wearing my glasses. Punk's biggest feud during this period was against Rey Mysterio, who he tried to convert to the Society.
Happy birthday to you. You are in denial of the fact that you are powerless. This will be a straight edge intervention. What this is failure in a bottle. Tonight we throw these in the garbage.
At WrestleMania, Rey beat Punk in a street fight to maintain his independence, but Punk beat Rey in a rematch at Extreme Rules where Punk would have his head shaved if he lost. At Over the Limit, with both stipulations in place, Rey came out on top, causing Punk to get his dome shaved.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right, not that there's anything wrong with...
Bald is beautiful, Brian.
Okay then. Back to Punk. From this defeat came an opportunity to entertain. Much like how Kurt Angle wore wrestling headgear with a wig to cover up his embarrassing haircut, Punk did something very similar with a sweet-looking SES mask, which he wore for 2 months before finally being unmasked by the Big Show.
You're not funny and nobody likes you.
And here's where it all came tumbling down. 1 week later, the Society's 4th mystery member was unmasked to reveal Joey Mercury, John Morrison's former tag partner, who was soon taken off of TV with an injury. Around this time, Serena was released from the company for apparently not living the straight edge lifestyle in public. Oh yeah, because kayfabe is so important to commit to in wrestling these days. Hey, bitter rivals Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns, how was your trip to the Roman Coliseum? Or hey, Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Iron Sheik, how was your recent visit to White Castle?
I see what you did there. I've been paying attention. I caught it. I saw what you did.
With only Punk and Luke Ski left, there wasn't much left to do except to dissolve the Straight Edge Society for good just before Punk returned to Raw in October of 2010. Soon after making the jump, Punk injured his hip, but remained on television by moving to the announcer's desk, giving a breath of fresh air to what had been some stale commentary.
With Jerry the... I mean, Mr. Punk.
Yeah. Punk. It's good that you're a comedian because you really suck at commentating.
Thanks.
Lucha Libre style of AJ.
It was an arm drag. Americans do arm drag. I was the king of the ring too, guys. You know that?
I don't have you on my list of past winners.
Yeah. I won the tournament we had in Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, that's a picture of me.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
I'm so glad you're here. The show is bad with or without you, but thank you for coming.
And they're chanting your name.
Capacity crowd obviously into this match as much as I am.
One step to your right.
Your other right. I think this is the greatest night of my life. Against Alicia Fox. Now these two absolutely hate each other. I don't know if you know that about a lot of the divas, but they all hate one another.
I think Maurice waved to me. Did she wave to me?
No. That was the referee.
Monday Night Raw in Orlando, Florida. What a dump. Punk.
When you address me, could you stop touching me, please?
I like it.
I purposely put a seat in between the two of us. King Kofi Kingston also has a nice ring to it. Not so nice on the initials, but King Kofi Kingston sounds great.
How do you know he was trying to steal his car?
Because he's Rey Mysterio. And that's what he does. He's a car thief on the side. He spilled my diet soda. He spilled my soda. And I want you to know that I've called the authorities. I called the cops.
Punk left the commentary team in favor of deciding to
beat up John Cena!
During his time on commentary, the Nexus debuted and had been having a bit of a dominating reign in the WWE, assaulting wrestlers and wrestling rings alike. And as it turned out, upon his return, he not only joined the group, but he would take the lead in it, as the WWE had him and Wade Barrett reenact everybody's favorite scene from The Lion King.
Brother, help me!
Long live the king.
Punk would then make the Nexus prove that they'd earned and deserved their spots. some of which instead opting to join former leader Wade Barrett in the core on SmackDown. And the less said about that, the better. The better. It was not good. The gimmick didn't last long, and it didn't really do much for any of the parties involved. Though during this time, he did finally avenge his title loss to Orton, years after the fact, but sure, yeah. Let's pick and choose which parts of our continuity to keep up. After a brief feud with Randy Orton that would see Punk more often than not looking up at the lights, and after gaining #1 contendership to the WWE Championship, he'd made a shocking reveal.
It's me, Austin! Oh, son of a bitch!
Okay, close, but let's try again.
I'm leaving with the WWE Championship.
There we go. With Punk's contract coming up, he threatened that he'd be leaving the WWE with the company's top belt. Something Brock Lesnar does every time he competes for the Universal title. On an episode of Raw during a tables match between John Cena and R-Truth, Punk interfered, removing a table just as Cena was about to win and allowing R-Truth to spear Cena through a table. Immediately after the match, Punk took a microphone and sat at the top of the entrance ramp, delivering what would become known as the Pipe Bomb promo. For the next 5 or so minutes, Punk aired all his on-screen and even off-screen grievances, in a very believable work-shoot promo. And despite the fact that Punk was already a household name, this was a career-defining promo. This was his Austin 316. Which makes the fact that he wore a Stone Cold shirt during all this that much more appropriate. During his rant, he talked about Paul Heyman's belief in him and Brock Lesnar, years before they'd make their return to WWE TV. He trash-talked Vince McMahon and his doofus son-in-law.
What's this I hear that you're making a joke out of me? We have ways of dealing with punks like you, where I'm from.
Try, please, I just... Wait a second. Isn't that supposed to be a sledgehammer?
Don't believe everything you see on TV, kid. This is my real weapon of choice. He's gonna bury you.
Look, Mr. I was just repeating what Punk had said for historical purposes.
Don't let it happen again. I don't like making unexpected cameos. Outside of Full Sail, of course.
Alright, I'll keep that in mind. So like I was saying, Punk name-dropped ROH, New Japan, and John Laurinaitis, who is not yet an on-screen authority figure. He listed his qualifications to being the best in the world. On the mic, in the ring, hell, even on commentary. He also aired his grievances about not being used properly, not being included on the company's opening video or on 7-Eleven cups. That's the kind of merch I want to be on. That's what's most important to me, honestly. And I think for him, too, you know. You definitely want to be on the cup that some pothead picks up at 3 a.m. when he wants a Slim Jim and a slushie. Before eventually even breaking the fourth wall to say hi to best friend and indie worker, Colt Cabana. Eventually his microphone feed was cut after a unbecoming review of WWE Chairman Vince McMahon, which is unfortunate because I really wanted him to at least get up to the part where he talked about Knucklehead. Really would have liked to hear his views on that.
I have a lot of things I want to get off my chest. I hate this idea that you're the best. I've been the best ever since day one when I walked into this company, and I've been vilified and hated since that day.
And what made this moment that much more believable was that it wasn't included on WWE.com. On WWE.com's version of events, the show cut off after Cena was put through the table, causing fans to really question what it is they just watched. This moment, like Stone Cold not tapping out to Bret Hart, made him a full-fledged face by proxy of audience reaction. Initially, Punk was given a suspension, but at the request of second runner-up Superman and then WWE Champion, John Cena, Punk was brought back to negotiate with Vince for a new contract. And he responded by playing mind games with the boss, giving him a ridiculous list of demands to renew his contract, to which Vince was given no other choice but to sign. And despite all this, Punk still didn't sign the contract.
You want your own collector's cup?
What a maneuver! My lawyers looked over your contract, Vince. A couple new perks that I've added to it. I want my face on the Titantron. Show me some respect. I want my face on these turnbuckles. I get to push you. I want cups. Posters, I want my own jet. I want you to bring back the WWE ice cream bars. Spoons, knives, forks, shoes, socks. CM Punk the movie. Main event of WrestleMania. You will apologize to me for suspending me last week. Say goodbye to the WWE title and say goodbye to CM Punk.
Side note, around this time the new Nexus quietly disbanded off screen and nobody complained. Honestly, it was a mercy killing. On Punk's final contractual date with the company, he faced John Cena in his hometown in one of the most anticipated matches of that decade. The match's atmosphere already put the event over the top, but the fact that Punk and Cena were able to take the momentum and make the magic that they had with it makes this one of the best WWE Championship matches I've ever seen. Vince signaled to call for the bell when Cena put Punk in his signature modified STF, in a moment that seemed to mirror that of the Montreal Screwjob. But Cena, being super babyface, put a stop to that. And honestly, good on him, not just because of this match's sake, but how many times do we want to rehash the Montreal Screwjob, alright? It's just... Even TNA did it. Let's just stop. Let's collectively as marks and smarks alike. Let's just push that out of the wrestling ether. You know what I mean? Like, take that out of the sports entertainment atmosphere. John Cena, not wanting to win by the way of a ruse, attacked Road Warrior Animal's real-life brother. And to the shock of everyone in attendance and everyone watching at home, CM Punk was the victor and did something very few men did. He won the championship on his way out. McMahon, wanting to ensure the future of his company and its most prized possession, sent Alberto Del Rio, the man who'd won the Money in the Bank match earlier that night. Del Rio made his way to the ring only to immediately be laid out by the new WWE champion. Punk would leave that night with the championship through the celebrating crowd, blowing a kiss to Vince McMahon on his way out. During his time away from the company, he'd show up at indie shows showing off his belt alongside Colt Cabana. And at WWE's panel at Comic-Con, he'd make an appearance calling out the COO Triple H, who is just the nicest guy. The nicest guy, let me tell you.
Well, you know where to find me. I'm sure Stephanie has my phone number, so
WWE held a tournament to crown its new champion, a tournament which was won by Rey Mysterio, who was then challenged by a returning John Cena, who would win it off him. Okay, yeah, I'm with you thus far. Only to then be confronted by a returning CM Punk with his own original WWE Championship. Alright, since both had legitimate claims of being the champion, for the first time in WWE history, it was decided that both belts would be on the line to crown the undisputed WWE champion. Not that undisputed WWE champion, but the WWE champion undisputedly. I hope that makes sense. The match, while well contested, did not end without its controversy. Punk would win the match only to then be assaulted by Kevin Nash. That's haven't been relevant since 1999. Kevin Nash. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan. And I do think that almost anything he was included in was entertaining, but in the year 2011, seeing Kevin Nash come out of retirement to feud with what was undoubtedly the biggest star of his era, it just seemed a little bit concerning and a lot of bit unnecessary.
OMG, Kevin Nash, WTF, thought he was dead, LOL.
Nash couldn't work the way that he once could, due to a series of injuries, most of them to his quads. Not to mention he was 52 years old at the time, so he's not exactly a spring chicken. Luckily, the match would never come to fruition due to a series of bad booking decisions and impending injuries. So instead, Triple H would come out of his in-ring retirement to face CM Punk at Night of Champions. Punk and Trips worked well together, but there's little doubt to anyone who watched that show that the wrong man went over, as Triple H, after his victory, would soon just go back to putting on a suit and being COO. He was no longer an in-ring competitor. He was no longer an active member of the roster. At best, he was a part-timer. Why did you do it? Why did you do it? Relatively soon, John Laurinaitis was implemented as the interim Raw general manager, who clashed with the anti-establishment Punk. Now, the storyline was clearly created out of the Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon story mold, but unlike all the owner versus worker stories that followed the original, I was actually a fan of this. I mean, John was so boring that he came off as a real legitimate businessman. No theatrics, no being over the top, just constantly trying to be professional. And Punk was the guy who questioned his boss at every turn, making his job that much harder and that much harder than it needed to be. Kind of like me with my old bosses, except they just fired me. They would just fire me, and then that was the end of that. They don't usually do that in wrestling because wrestling's dumb.
Please join me in honoring a legend.
Oh, look at that! Oh, there you go!
Hey, you know, I've never got to tell you this face to face, but mine is a whole hell of a lot bigger than yours. What the WWE Universe doesn't want to see is you. And they don't want to hear about the time you spent in Japan. I especially love the revisionist history about how good you really were. That was awesome. The reason you had to go compete in Japan is because there wasn't a territory or a person in a single one that would pay a dime to see your rotten ass wrestle.
Johnny Ace is hot. I am one of a kind.
You were a joke then, and you left. And you came back, and you're still a joke.
My name is John Laurinaitis.
Well, you were on Raw a couple weeks ago bragging about how many Twitter followers you had, which I thought was cute, so I came up with some numbers of my own.
You're stupid, you're ugly, and you have no friends. You're also a gigantic toolbox.
1,000 is the number of hits you get when you type in Laurinaitis and spineless in a Google search.
So I graciously accept this award on his behalf.
918,000. That's the number of hits you get when you type in Del Rio and boring into a Google search.
You like me! You really, really like me!
Oh, Otunga, I typed your name in, but a bunch of stuff just came up about somebody named Jennifer Hudson.
This time next week, I'll still be WWE champion, and you'll be hanging out in the unemployment line. Na 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 na, yeah. Na 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 na, hey hey hey. Goodbye, clown shoes. Allow me to be the first one to wish you best of luck on your future endeavors.
And shake his hand, Punk. Yes. No, no, no! Don't do that! Don't do that! Oh my God!
It's somewhat a shame that John Laurinaitis never got the chance to go in the ring with his constant bully. It'd be like Michael Scott and Toby of The Office engaging in a round of fisticuffs. Week in and week out, Punk would find new ways to harass his new intern boss, who would in turn do all that he could to make Punk's life a living hell. CM Punk would regain his championship back from Alberto Del Rio at Survivor Series. He continued to defend his title against the likes of the former champion, The Miz, and Dolph Ziggler, who, in my personal opinion, the two of them would put on classic after classic. Seriously underrated stuff. Anybody who thinks Dolph Ziggler is boring, check these matches out. I mean, I'm not going to say these matches are as great as Bret Hart versus Tom McGee, because clearly they lack the star power that McGee brings to the table, but worth the watch. They had this one match on the main event of Raw that I'm pretty sure won Match of the Year, and if it didn't, the company lied to you because it should have. From a strictly wrestling standpoint, I highly suggest checking out their work together. Not long after, Chris Jericho would return to the company, slagging Punk about calling himself the best in the world, a name that he'd already proclaimed. But I guess he forgot to get it trademarked, so hey, fair use, dude. That's on you. That's on you. The best in the world would proceed to take on the best in the world at everything he does on multiple occasions, never putting on a bad performance. A rivalry that seemed simple enough, what with Jericho wanting Punk's title and nickname, suddenly became a bit more twisted as Jericho began to attack the straight-edge superstar for having an alcoholic father, claiming that alcoholism is a disease and that he too would become susceptible to it. Chris, I don't know that there's science there behind you. After taunting Punk continuously, he'd sent the voice of the voiceless a gift basket which included a shitload of alcohol before accusing him of being drunk on Raw. And this would be Punk's first notable feud during his second run with the WWE Championship. You know, outside of John Laurinaitis, that is. Luckily, he'd find his next one directly after, against his real-life buddy, Daniel Bryan. Like Jericho and Punk, these two never had a bad match against each other. The two never saw a crowd that didn't leave the building entertained, and they never put on a performance not to be proud of. Not only were these two brilliant workers with incredible chemistry, but they were also two of the most beloved characters in recent memory. So now you may be thinking, as WWE was at the time, how can this get any better? I mean, we got two of the all-time greats, two modern marvels, if you will, going one-on-one, pay-per-view after pay-per-view, legitimizing our title, main eventing our shows. The top 2 most over guys in the company, battling for the company's top prize, having fantastic matches. How could this get any better? What can we do? What's the next step? And the obvious answer, of course, is add Kane. Kane was brought into the feud with all 3 of them feuding over the love of AJ. No, not that AJ. Although, you know what? That would be interesting. That would be interesting. This AJ. Daniel Bryan's ex-girlfriend AJ Lee would involve herself in the angle after turning her affection from him toward both the Big Red Machine and the Best in the World. And here's a short highlight reel of that feud.
Will you marry me?
Now, a lot more skeptical or more cynical fans may think that throwing the somewhat limited big man into the match would ruin things. And, logistically it probably should have. But surprisingly, it didn't. The 3 worked pretty well together, putting on an impressive showing, with AJ playing a good part in that storyline. Personally, I like this story, but I do feel like maybe it would have been better if it didn't involve the championship, because AJ kind of seemed to overshadow the belt for some reason, but hey, that's just me. Punk would go on to hold the title for an impressive 434 days, one of the longest reigns the company had seen in the last 15 years at the time.
Oh shit, my turn. Punk was doing great as an anti-authority babyface champion, which obviously meant it was time to turn him heel, because hey, The Rock needed somebody to fight. At Raw 1000, Punk attacked the Great One, tired that he and John Cena's tiff was overshadowing the WWE Champion. There was absolutely nothing wrong with that sentiment. Things came full circle as Paul Heyman, the man who'd originally endorsed Punk in OVW, had shown up to help out the champ.
Paul, you alright? Paul!
My God, Paul, you almost gave me a heart attack.
After John Cena had to back out of an upcoming title match at Hell in a Cell, the relative newcomer Ryback was put in his place. This was a very tricky spot for the company to be in. Do you have Ryback keep his dominant unbeaten streak going, capping off with a shocking title win, however preventing Punk from breaking the modern record of 380 days as champion? Or do you have Punk win in order to keep his title match with The Rock in January a lock, thereby cutting off a promising new star?
That may be the only time in human history that someone used the words Ryback and promising new star in the same sentence without also including is not a in between the two of them.
Look, we didn't know at the time, okay? WWE went with the latter as Punk retained the title with the help of crooked referee Brad Maddox, and that's far from the worst thing that guy did in his time in the company. The following month at Survivor Series, Punk would retain yet again in a triple threat, thanks to the debut of a little group called The Shield. Thank goodness those guys all amounted to something, otherwise this whole thing might have been real silly. On we go to January of 2013, the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. After Punk held the championship for 434 days, The Rock swooped in and beat him for the title. The Rock then debuted a brand new title belt, one that was the first version of what today's WWE Championship looks like. So after 8 years of people besides John Cena having the blinged out championship, more than a year of that where CM Punk was the only guy to hold it, only now they debut a brand new belt? There is no God! Punk fought The Rock in a rematch at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, but would lose there as well. It was the same night where John Cena earned a shot at The Rock's title, putting a little extra sauce on this once-in-a-lifetime rematch that nobody asked for. With Punk properly shunted out of the main event picture, he set his sights toward The Undertaker for WrestleMania 29. For a PG program, Punk got as vile and dastardly as you could get, showing disrespect toward the recently deceased Paul Bearer and even stealing his urn.
I want to extend my heartfelt apologies for your loss.
at WrestleMania.
The match at Mania was terrific, easily one of the best of the night, and definitely better than the Rock-Cena match that ended the show. But as Punk has said in interviews since, he sure didn't get paid like The Undertaker.
Punk would take some time off following his loss to The Undertaker, but he'd eventually return to face Chris Jericho again, a match which he won. The next night he broke off his working relationship with Paul Heyman, and not long after he was attacked by Heyman's client, Brock Lesnar. Despite this, Paul claimed he didn't send Lesnar after him, and that whatever problems Lesnar and Punk had was between Lesnar and Punk. Punk, channeling his inner Sting and his amazing ability to constantly throw logic out the window and trust the wrong person, chose to listen to Heyman. That is until his intentions became crystal clear. Punk challenged Lesnar, turning his attention toward Heyman's other client, Curtis Axel, when Lesnar wasn't around, which, as we know by his schedule, was quite often. It happened a lot. Eventually the two would compete at SummerSlam, a match that was booked as The Beast versus The Best, and a match which wrestling fans and makers of memes dubbed Hulk vs. Wolverine. It had a similar outcome, I'll give them that. Punk got a fair amount of offense in, and the match itself was a hell of a back and forth. Both men looked strong going in and coming out of this match. But this one had a very clear victor, and guess what? It wasn't Punk. This match, while highly entertaining, and also helping to reestablish Lesnar as the most dominant force in WWE, didn't really do a whole lot for CM. His last months in the company were pretty pitiful. While the fans still cheered for him as if he were a top star, he was no longer being booked like one. After losing to Lesnar, Punk's feud with Heyman continued as he took on Curtis Axel and new Paul Heyman guy, Ryback, which was a far cry from taking on The Undertaker at WrestleMania. Following the quiet blow-off of his feud with Paul Heyman, Punk found himself in an impromptu tag team with Daniel Bryan, which would affectionately be referred to as The Best and The Beard. That's stupid. The two would feud with the Wyatt family and The Shield, who in of themselves were working collectively for the Authority. He competed in that year's Royal Rumble where he'd suffer an injury, and Corporate Kane would show up to put him out of his misery by putting him through a table while the guy was legitimately injured. Good on him. And that was Punk's last appearance in WWE, silently retiring before later becoming very vocal as to why. Allegedly, the plans going forward would have seen a rematch with Triple H at that year's WrestleMania, which Punk was unenthusiastic about, despite learning that he was going to get the victory. Punk, and I quote, said, "I don't need to wrestle you, you need to wrestle me." And for the time period, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, Triple H is a swell guy. He's a swell guy. I just want to take him out somewhere and get him a smoothie, you know?
The years that have followed since Punk's departure from WWE have been interesting to say the least. After being silent for months after the Rumble, he finally showed up on Colt Cabana's podcast to vent his frustrations about the company, the locker room culture, working with Ryback, his habit for working injured, his conversations with Vince McMahon and Triple H, and a little tidbit where he got fired on his wedding day.
That reminds me, is now a bad time to ask about the legal fees you owe me, or...?
Shortly after his appearance on Cabana's podcast, Punk announced he was signing with UFC, this despite having no prior MMA experience.
You have decided to enter the octagon and fight mixed martial arts professionally.
Hey, you're white! You're white! You don't fight!
After having his first fight delayed by several months due to a shoulder injury and then a herniated disc in his back, Punk finally took on Mickey Gall in September of 2016, where he tapped out about 2 minutes into the first round.
I know how to fight!
Punk would fall yet again in June of this year, where he lost by unanimous decision to Mike Jackson. It's pretty crazy how fast Punk lost his passion for wrestling if he'd rather get his ass kicked in the octagon for real than work matches with people in wrestling and win most of the time. I mean, the guy couldn't even win a fight in a music video. But even if Punk has been unlucky in fighting, at least he's proven himself to be adept at writing comic books. One of his first loves growing up, he started doing some guest writing for several Marvel and Vertigo comics publications since leaving pro wrestling. It probably doesn't pay as much as wrestling or mixed martial arts, but at least he seems to be in his element. I think the most curious thing in the aftermath of Punk's career implosion is his relationship with wrestling fans. From the very beginning, fans screamed for Punk to be given a chance, to be treated like the star they believed him to be. Even when he made do with the opportunities he was given, it wasn't enough for some people. Then when he left the company, his fan base was fragmented. Some called him a quitter, while others treated him like a martyr. Even today, nearly 5 years after his last match at the Rumble, some WWE crowds will still chant his name as a form of protest and defiance. But the longer Punk stays away from pro wrestling, the quieter the chants become. The more he separates himself from the industry, the more people forget about what he accomplished, the more they resent him for leaving. And with the recent blow-up between he and Colt Cabana, the wrestling fanbase at large has pretty much decided he's a pariah now. If he came back to wrestling tomorrow, I think he'd be welcomed back with open arms by fans, but it would take a lot for them to forget what some fans might consider a betrayal to them.
Though his impact can't be denied. Because even after everything had already been done in wrestling, Punk found a way to do something new. Defining his legacy in the squared circle, but not letting that legacy define him as a man.
So with all that being said, this pretty much just leads me to one question.
And what's that, V?
Why didn't we do this on your channel?
Oh, well, I don't know how to break it to you, man, but, my channel hates you.
Your channel loves me.
Really? The other guy's voice is putting me to sleep. The Stone Cold Soap has more charisma than your cameo co-host Quaalude Quentin. Nice alliteration. If Sami Zayn and CM Punk got into the teleporter in The Fly, is Infuso what would come out?
Alright, message received. Thank you for joining me here today. That was Wrestling with Regret, the influencer, Brian Zane, and I am his Make-A-Wish Foundation kid, apparently. The social injustice warrior, buy the shirts, Infuso. Oh crap, you're not gonna bury me, are you?
Well, I was, until I heard the comments on Zane's video. Now I'm gonna hand you the shovel, cause you just buried yourself.
Don't you have a brand to run?
Alright. Message received.
Everywhere you look, everywhere too hard, and to hold on to. Everywhere you look, everywhere too late. Somebody who needs you.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. You're watching the social injustice warrior Infuso's channel, dude. So if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too want to become a VTard, don't forget to like and subscribe, and click that little bell icon to get updates and notifications. Ooh, tell him what up, Mach. Ooh, yeah. Follow the man on Twitter, yeah, because we all know it's not stalking if it's on the internet, yeah. Join the madness by joining the Discord, and if you have a moment of time and a free $1 to spare, head over to the SIJW's Patreon, dig it, where you can request videos, get exclusive videos, and early access to content, yeah. Or go down to PayPal, where you can buy the shirts, brother. But most importantly, just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
Wow, that hurt. Very impressive.
I am the best in the world.
Mandela.
Sure, Miz is watching.
Look at him.
I've torn the pectoral muscle completely off my shoulder.
I've had surgery 5 times in my left knee.
My shoulder was separated. Rub it, sock it.